The city of New Haven stretched endlessly under a pale gray sky, its towering buildings gleaming with reflective surfaces that mirrored the clouds above. It was a place of order, efficiency, and peace. For centuries, humanity had managed to avoid the horrors of war by relying on machines, intelligent systems designed to handle conflict without involving fragile human lives. But today, something felt different. The air carried an unusual tension, as though the calm surface of life in New Haven hid ripples of chaos just beneath. Jack Harper sat at his desk, flipping through pages of an old book about ancient battles. His office was cluttered with stacks of papers, maps, and artifacts from wars long forgotten by most people. Jack wasn't like everyone else. While others preferred to look toward the future, he spent his days studying the past, fascinated by how humans once fought each other with primitive weapons and raw emotion. He often wondered if those old strategies still held value, or if they were relics best left buried. Across the room, Emma Lewis worked silently at her station. Her workspace was neat and organized, filled with holographic displays showing schematics of advanced weaponry. She was an engineer, one of the brightest minds working on artificial intelligence and combat systems. Unlike Jack, she rarely thought about history. Her focus was always on the present and the future, finding ways to make machines smarter, faster, and more effective. Still, there was something unsettling about the call they had both received earlier that morning. It came unexpectedly, a message marked urgent from the Global Defense Council. Neither Jack nor Emma could recall the last time the GDC had reached out directly to them. The council operated behind closed doors, overseeing Earth's automated defenses and ensuring the planet remained safe from external threats. Their work was invisible to the average citizen, who lived blissfully unaware of the dangers lurking beyond Earth's atmosphere. So when two soldiers arrived at their doorsteps early that morning, escorting them to the council headquarters, it was clear this was no ordinary meeting. The ride to the GDC building was quiet. Jack stared out the window, watching the city blur past. He noticed how empty the street seemed, even for a weekday. People hurried along, heads down, as if sensing the unease in the air. Emma, sitting beside him, fidgeted nervously with her jacket sleeve. She didn't say much, but Jack could tell she was thinking hard about what might await them. When they arrived, the GDC chamber was dimly lit, dominated by a massive circular table surrounded by high-ranking officials. At the center of the room floated a hologram, a swirling mass of black tendrils intertwined with glowing red veins. It pulsed rhythmically, almost alive. Jack felt a chill run down his spine as he stared at it. "This is our enemy," said General Marcus Hale, his voice low but firm. "We call it the Veil. It appeared near the edge of our solar system 6 months ago. Initially, we thought it was some kind of cosmic phenomenon. Then it started moving toward us." Emma leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" General Hale hesitated before answering. "We don't know for sure. Our scans suggest it's not entirely organic or mechanical, it's something in between. What we do know is that it's hostile. Every drone, mech, and AI unit we've sent to intercept has been destroyed." Jack's stomach tightened. Machines had defended Earth flawlessly for centuries. If the Veil could defeat them so easily, then what hope did humanity have? "And that's why you've called us?" Emma asked, her tone sharp. "Yes," replied another official, a woman named Dr. Laura Bennett. "Our automated systems are failing. We've exhausted every option. There's only one course of action left." Jack exchanged a glance with Emma. They both knew what was coming next, but neither wanted to believe it. "We need humans," General Hale continued. "Real humans. On the battlefield." A heavy silence fell over the room. Jack swallowed hard, trying to process what he'd just heard. Humans hadn't fought in wars for over 300 years. The decision to banish them from battlefields had been unanimous after the catastrophic conflicts of the 21st century. Machines were supposed to be the solution, to eliminate the bloodshed, the suffering, the irrationality of human emotions. And now all of that progress was being undone. "Why us?" Jack finally asked, breaking the silence. "You're experts," Dr. Bennett explained. Jack, your knowledge of historical warfare could provide insights we desperately need. And, Emma, your expertise in engineering will be critical for adapting outdated equipment for human use. Emma shook her head. Outdated equipment? You mean the stuff we abandoned centuries ago? Yes, General Hale confirmed. It's all we have left that can be operated manually. We'll need you to oversee modifications to ensure it's functional. Jack rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Do you even realize what you're asking? These aren't trained soldiers. They're civilians. Sending them into battle against something like... He gestured toward the hologram. This thing, it's suicide. We understand the risks, Dr. Bennett said softly. But we have no choice. If we don't act now, Earth will fall. Emma stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth. This is insane. We haven't prepared for this. We don't even know if humans can still fight effectively. It's not ideal, General Hale admitted. But desperation breeds innovation. Humanity has survived because of its ability to adapt. That's what we're counting on. As the meeting ended, Jack and Emma stepped outside, the enormity of the situation sinking in. The streets of New Haven seemed quieter than ever, as if the entire city was holding its breath. Jack glanced at Emma, who looked equally overwhelmed. What do we do now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We do what they asked, Jack replied, though he sounded uncertain. Because if we don't, nobody else will. Over the next few days, preparations began in earnest. Recruitment centers popped up across the globe, calling for volunteers, or conscripts, to join the effort. Fort Resolute, a remote military installation originally built during the final days of human-led warfare, became the training ground. Thousands of civilians poured in, wide-eyed and terrified, unsure of what awaited them. Among them were Sarah Blake, a former track star whose athletic build made her a prime candidate for physical endurance tests, and Ryan Carter, a mechanic, with nimble hands and quick problem-solving skills. Both had signed up reluctantly, driven more by patriotism than personal desire. They met during orientation, bonding over their shared anxiety. I can fix engines, Ryan muttered as they stood in line for uniforms. Doesn't mean I can shoot a gun. Sarah forced a smile. I guess we'll learn together. Training proved brutal. Most recruits had never held a weapon before, let alone fired one. Instructors barked orders, pushing them to their limits. Colonel William Hayes, a grizzled veteran brought out of retirement, took charge of the program. He moved among the recruits with a stern expression, offering little sympathy. You think this is tough? He shouted during a particularly grueling exercise. Wait until you're staring death in the face, then you'll wish for this kind of pain. Despite the harsh conditions, small moments of camaraderie began to emerge. Sarah helped Ryan improve his aim, while Ryan showed her how to maintain her gear. Slowly, bonds formed, not just between them, but among the entire group. They shared stories of home, fears about the future, and hopes that maybe, just maybe, they could make a difference. Back at the engineering bay, Emma worked tirelessly, retrofitting old exoskeleton suits and testing modified rifles. She marveled at how clunky and inefficient everything felt compared to modern technology. Yet she couldn't deny the spark of determination she saw in the recruits. There was something raw and primal about their willingness to step into the unknown, even if it meant facing almost certain death. Meanwhile, Jack pored over ancient texts, searching for any strategy that might give humanity an edge. He found himself drawn to accounts of guerrilla warfare, ambush tactics, and psychological manipulation. These methods relied heavily on human intuition and adaptability, qualities machines lacked. Could they be adapted for modern use? As weeks turned into months, the reality of the situation grew clearer. The veil wasn't slowing down. Reports of attacks on orbital stations and mining colonies poured in daily. Time was running out. Humanity's fate rested in the hands of amateurs armed with obsolete tools and guided by experts who weren't sure themselves if victory was possible. Yet amidst the fear and uncertainty, a glimmer of hope remained. Perhaps the very flaws that had led to humanity's prohibition from war their emotions, their unpredictability, were also their greatest strengths. After all, it was those same qualities that had driven them to survive, adapt, and thrive throughout history. Whether they would prove enough against the Veil remained to be seen. The sun rose over Fort Resolute, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dust and metal. Inside the compound, the recruits were already up and moving, their footsteps echoing on the hard ground as they lined up for another day of training. Sarah Blake adjusted the strap of her rifle, her fingers brushing against the worn grip. She glanced at Ryan Carter, who stood a few feet away, his face set in a grim expression. Neither of them had imagined their lives would come to this, waking, up before dawn, learning how to kill and preparing for a battle that might very well end in their deaths. Colonel William Hayes paced in front of the group, his boots crunching against the gravel. He stopped abruptly, his sharp eyes scanning the line of recruits. "Listen up," he barked, his voice cutting through the morning silence. "You're not soldiers yet, not even close, but you will be. Because if you don't shape up, none of us are walking away from this alive." The recruits shifted uneasily, some exchanging nervous glances. Hayes wasn't exaggerating. Everyone knew what was at stake. The Veil was advancing, its biomechanical forces growing stronger with each passing day. Automated defenses had failed repeatedly, leaving humanity with no choice but to rely on these untrained civilians. It was a gamble, but it was the only card left to play. Training began with basic drills, marching in formation, assembling and disassembling weapons, practicing hand-to-hand combat. For many, the physical demands were overwhelming. Some collapsed during runs, their legs giving out under the strain. Others struggled to aim their rifles, their hands trembling as they tried to steady their breathing. Despite the challenges, progress was visible. Slowly, the recruits were learning to work together, to trust one another, and to push past their limits. Sarah found herself gravitating toward Ryan more often than not. His calm demeanor and practical mindset balanced her fiery determination. During breaks, they sat together sharing water bottles and ration packs. "How are you holding up?" Ryan asked one afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'm okay," Sarah replied, though her tired eyes told a different story. "It's just, I never thought I'd have to do something like this. I mean, fighting aliens? It sounds like something out of a movie." Ryan nodded. "Yeah, but here we are. Guess we don't get to pick our battles." Sarah smiled faintly. "No, we don't. But at least we've got each other." Their friendship became a source of strength for both of them. When Sarah struggled with marksmanship, Ryan stayed late to help her practice. When Ryan couldn't keep up during endurance runs, Sarah encouraged him to keep going. Together they pushed each other forward, determined to survive whatever lay ahead. Meanwhile, Jack Harper spent his days buried in research, poring over ancient texts and war journals. His small office was cluttered with maps, diagrams, and notes, scribbled on scraps of paper. He often lost track of time, emerging only when Emma Lewis knocked on his door to remind him to eat or sleep. "Jack, you can't keep doing this to yourself," Emma said one evening, leaning against the doorway. Her arms were crossed and her expression was a mix of concern and frustration. "You're going to burn out before we even get to the battlefield." Jack looked up from his desk, his glasses perched precariously on the edge of his nose. "I can't stop, Emma. Every second counts. If I can find just one strategy that gives us an edge, it could make all the difference." Emma sighed, stepping into the room. "I get it. Really, I do. But you're not the only one working on this. We're all in this together. You need to take care of yourself." Jack hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "You're right, I'll try to pace myself." As the days passed, Emma focused her energy on improving the outdated equipment. The exoskeleton suits were heavy and cumbersome, designed for a world that no longer existed. She worked tirelessly, modifying joints for better mobility, reinforcing armor plating, and integrating communication systems. It was slow, painstaking work, but she refused to give up. Each improvement brought them one step closer to readiness. One afternoon, Emma called Jack into the engineering bay to show him her latest modification, a prototype weapon that combined elements of old firearms with modern targeting technology. "What do you think?" she asked, handing him the rifle. Jack examined it carefully, testing the weight and balance. "It's good," he said after a moment. "But it's still too complicated. Most of these recruits won't know how to use it properly." "I know," Emma admitted, "but it's the best I can do with what we have. Maybe if we simplify the controls." Jack nodded. "Let me know when you've made adjustments. In the meantime, I've been looking into ambush tactics. They might be our best bet against the Veil." "Ambush tactics?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that a little risky?" "It's risky, yes," Jack agreed. "But the Veil relies on overwhelming force and speed. If we can catch them off guard, even for a moment, it could give us the opening we need." Emma frowned, considering his words. "It's worth a shot. Just make sure the recruits are ready for it." As the weeks went by, the recruits grew more confident. They learned to move as a unit, covering each other's blind spots and communicating effectively. Colonel Hayes pushed them harder than ever, simulating combat scenarios that tested their skills and resolve. Mistakes were punished harshly, but successes were acknowledged with grudging respect. During one particularly intense exercise, Sarah and Ryan found themselves separated from the main group. Their task was to secure a mock enemy position while avoiding detection. The forest around them was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath their boots. Sarah signaled for Ryan to stay low as they approached the target area. "Do you see anything?" Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah shook her head. "Not yet. Keep your eyes open." They moved cautiously, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a trainer, dressed in camouflage, playing the role of an enemy soldier. Before Sarah could react, Ryan stepped forward, raising his rifle. The trainer froze, then nodded approvingly. "Good job," he said. "You spotted me before I could spot you." Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Nice work," she told Ryan, clapping him on the shoulder. Ryan grinned. "Guess all that practice is paying off." Despite their growing confidence, doubts lingered. Many of the recruits wondered if they were truly prepared for what awaited them. The Veil wasn't just another enemy. It was something alien, incomprehensible. Its biomechanical nature made it unpredictable, and its motives remained a mystery. Would human ingenuity and adaptability be enough to overcome such a foe? One evening, after a long day of training, Sarah and Ryan sat around a campfire with a few other recruits. The flames crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on their faces. Conversation was sparse, the weight of their impending mission hanging heavily in the air. "What do you think happens if we fail?" one of the recruits asked quietly. No one answered immediately. The question hung there, unanswered, until Sarah finally spoke. "We can't afford to think like that. If we fail, Earth falls, so we don't fail." Her words carried a quiet determination that resonated with everyone present. They weren't soldiers by trade, but they had become something else, something stronger. They were survivors, united by a shared purpose and a refusal to give up. Back at headquarters, Jack and Emma reviewed the latest reports from reconnaissance drones. The Veil's forces were massing near one of Earth's orbital stations, a critical hub for communications and resource distribution. An attack was imminent, and humanity's automated defenses wouldn't hold for long. "We need to deploy the recruits soon," Emma said, her tone urgent. "If we wait too long, we'll lose the station and possibly the war." Jack nodded, his expression grim. "I'll brief Colonel Hayes. We'll need to finalize the strategy tonight." As they worked late into the night, the reality of their situation weighed heavily on them. The recruits weren't ready, not completely. But time was running out, and waiting any longer would only increase the risk of failure. Humanity's survival depended on imperfect people using imperfect tools to fight an enemy unlike anything they had ever faced. Yet amidst the uncertainty, a spark of hope remained. Perhaps it was the resilience of the recruits, their ability to adapt and persevere despite overwhelming odds. Or perhaps it was the knowledge that humanity's greatest strength had always been its capacity to rise above fear and despair. Whatever. The reason Jack and Emma held onto it tightly, knowing it might be the only thing keeping them going. The next morning, the recruits gathered in the briefing room, their faces etched with a mixture of determination and apprehension. Colonel Hayes stood at the front, his posture rigid, his voice commanding. "This is it," he said. "The moment we've been preparing for. The veil is coming, and we're the only ones standing in its way. Are you ready?" A chorus of affirmations filled the room, though the tension was palpable. Sarah and Ryan exchanged a glance, their unspoken promise clear. They would face whatever came next together. As the recruits filed out, Jack and Emma watched from the sidelines, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead. They had done everything they could to prepare them. Now it was up to fate and humanity's indomitable spirit to see them through. The orbital station known as Haven 7 hung silently in the vast emptiness of space, its metallic surface glinting faintly under the distant light of the sun. It was a critical hub for Earth's communications network, a lifeline connecting humanity across continents and beyond. But now, it was under siege. The veil had arrived without warning, its biomechanical forces swarming like a plague of locusts. Automated defenses fired relentlessly, but their efforts were futile. The alien creatures moved with unnatural speed and precision, tearing through steel walls and disabling systems with ease. On board the station, chaos reigned. Civilians scrambled to evacuate, their panicked voices crackling over emergency channels. Engineers worked frantically to seal breaches and reroute power, but the situation was spiraling out of control. In orbit, fleets of drones launched desperate counterattacks only to be obliterated moments later. Humanity's machines were no match for this new enemy. As reports of the attack reached Fort Resolute, the decision was made. The recruits would deploy immediately. Jack Harper stood on the Boris launch pad, watching as transport shuttles prepared for departure. His hands trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it by clutching a clipboard tightly. Beside him, Emma Lewis checked and rechecked the equipment being loaded onto the ships. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. Neither of them had expected the recruits to see combat so soon. They weren't ready, not fully, but waiting any longer wasn't an option. Colonel William Hayes barked orders, his voice cutting through the noise of engines and hurried footsteps. "Listen up," he shouted, addressing the recruits gathered around him. "This is real, this is happening, you've trained for this moment. Trust your instincts, trust your team, and stay alive." Sarah Blake adjusted the straps of her helmet, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced at Ryan Carter, who gave her a small nod. Both of them knew what was at stake. If Haven 7 fell, Earth's defenses would crumble. Failure wasn't an option. The shuttle ride to the station was tense and silent. Most of the recruits stared out the windows, watching as the damaged structure grew larger and larger. Plumes of smoke drifted from ruptured sections, and flashes of light marked ongoing skirmishes between drones and the Veil's forces. When they docked, the airlock hissed open, revealing a scene of devastation. Twisted metal littered the corridors, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. "Move out," Colonel Hayes ordered, leading the way with his rifle raised. The recruits followed, their movements cautious but determined. They fanned out, securing each section they passed. At first, resistance was minimal, just scattered remnants of the Veil's advance forces. But as they pushed deeper into the station, the enemy became more numerous and aggressive. Sarah ducked behind a console as a swarm of biomechanical creatures surged toward them. Their bodies were sleek and insect-like, with glowing red veins pulsing beneath translucent exoskeletons. They moved with eerie coordination, firing bursts of energy that shattered walls and sent sparks flying. Ryan aimed his rifle, squeezing off shots with steady hands. One of the creatures collapsed, its body twitching before going still. "Keep moving," Hayes yelled, gesturing for the group to advance. "We need to reach the central core." The central core was the heart of the station, housing its main power supply and control systems. If the Veil gained access to it, they could cripple Earth's entire communication network. The recruits fought their way forward, relying on teamwork to survive. Sarah spotted a weak point in the enemy's formation and signaled for Ryan to create a diversion. He threw a makeshift grenade, a modified piece of equipment Emma had designed, and the explosion sent several creatures sprawling. "Now!" Sarah shouted, charging forward with her rifle blazing. Her shots found their mark, taking down 2 more enemies. Behind her, other recruits provided covering fire, their aim improving with every passing second. For all their inexperience, they were learning quickly. In another part of the station, Emma worked furiously to stabilize the failing systems. She had volunteered to stay behind enemy lines, knowing her technical expertise was crucial. With each keystroke, she patched breaches in the station's firewall, buying precious time for the recruits to reach the core. Sweat dripped from her forehead, but she didn't stop. The fate of the mission, and possibly Earth, depended on her. Meanwhile, Jack monitored the battle from a command center, analyzing data feeds and offering strategic advice. His eyes darted across screens displaying live footage of the fight. He noticed patterns in the Veil's movements, subtle shifts in behavior that hinted at vulnerabilities. "They're protecting something," he muttered to himself. "There has to be a reason they're focusing so heavily on the core." He relayed his observations to Colonel Hayes, who adjusted the plan accordingly. The recruits split into smaller teams, flanking the Veil's forces and drawing their attention away from the core. It was a risky maneuver, but it worked. The enemy's numbers thinned as they pursued the decoys, giving the main team a chance to press forward. As they neared the core, the resistance intensified. Dozens of biomechanical creatures blocked their path, their glowing eyes fixed menacingly on the humans. Colonel Hayes took charge, organizing a coordinated assault. "On my mark," he shouted. "Fire!" The recruits unleashed a barrage of gunfire, forcing the creatures to retreat momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, Sarah sprinted toward the core, planting explosives along the walls as she went. Ryan covered her, his rifle never wavering. "Hurry!" he urged, his voice tight with urgency. Inside the core chamber, a massive biomechanical entity loomed, a towering amalgamation of flesh and machinery that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Its presence was overwhelming, radiating a sense of menace that made even the bravest recruits hesitate. Sarah planted the final explosive, near its base, her hands shaking as she set the timer. "We need to go," Ryan called, grabbing her arm. Together, they ran back toward the exit, dodging blasts of energy as the creature lashed out in fury. Behind them, the explosives detonated, sending shockwaves rippling through the chamber. The entity let out a deafening screech before collapsing into a heap of twisted metal and organic matter. Outside, the remaining recruits regrouped, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. Colonel Hayes surveyed the damage, his expression unreadable. "Good work," he said finally. "You held the line." But the victory came at a cost. Several recruits lay injured or worse, their sacrifices ensuring the mission's success. Sarah knelt beside one of the fallen, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. Back in the command center, Jack watched the aftermath unfold. His heart ached for the losses, but he couldn't deny the significance of what they had achieved. The recruits had faced an unimaginable threat and emerged victorious, not because they were perfect, but because they refused to give up. Emma joined him shortly afterward, her face pale but resolute. "We did it," she said softly. "For now, at least." Jack nodded. "Yes, but this isn't over. The Veil will come again, and next time we'll need to be better prepared." As the survivors boarded the shuttles for the return trip to Earth, a somber mood settled over them. They had proven that humans could still fight, even against an enemy as formidable as the Veil. But the battle had revealed just how fragile their position truly was. Machines alone couldn't protect them, and neither could raw determination. To stand a chance against the Veil, humanity would need to adapt, to combine the precision of technology with the unpredictability of human ingenuity. On the journey home, Sarah stared out the window, her thoughts heavy. She thought about the friends she had lost, the lives cut short in the blink of an eye. Yet amidst the grief, there was a flicker of hope. They had survived, They had won, and as long as they kept fighting, humanity still had a chance. Ryan broke the silence, his voice gentle. "We made it," he said. "That's something, right?" Sarah managed a small smile. "Yeah, it's something." Below them, Earth spun, quietly in the void, its blue-green surface a reminder of everything they were fighting for. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but for now, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet triumph. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, for themselves, for each other, and for the future of their species. The victory at Haven 7 was bittersweet. The recruits returned to Fort Resolute as heroes, but the celebration was muted. Too many lives had been lost, and the cost of their success weighed heavily on everyone. Sarah Blake walked through the camp, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust. She passed groups of survivors sitting in silence, their faces pale and drawn. Some stared blankly into the distance, while others whispered quietly, sharing memories of those who hadn't made it back. Carter sat on a crate outside the medical tent, his hands resting on his knees. He watched as medics carried stretchers inside, their movements brisk and efficient. Many of the wounded were beyond help, their injuries too severe for even the most advanced medical technology. Ryan clenched his fists, anger and guilt bubbling inside him. "We should have done more," he muttered under his breath. Sarah stopped beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We did what we could," she said softly. "That's all anyone can ask." Ryan shook his head. "Is it? We barely won. If things had gone differently—" "They didn't," Sarah interrupted firmly. "And we're still here. That has to count for something." Her words were meant to comfort, but they only scratched the surface of the deeper questions gnawing at both of them. What had they truly accomplished? Yes, they had saved the orbital station, but at what price? And how long would their fragile victory last against an enemy like the Veil? Inside the command center, Jack Harper and Emma Lewis reviewed data from the battle. The screens around them displayed images of biomechanical creatures frozen mid-motion, their alien forms dissected pixel by pixel. Jack leaned closer, studying one particular frame. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a section of the creature's exoskeleton. "There's a pattern here, lines where the material thins slightly. It might be a structural weakness." Emma squinted at the screen, then nodded. "If we can target those areas, it could make our weapons more effective. But getting that kind of precision in combat won't be easy." "Nothing about this is easy," Jack replied grimly. "But if we don't figure it out, we won't survive the next fight." Colonel William Hayes entered the room, his expression unreadable. "Good news travels fast," he said, nodding toward the screens. "But don't get too comfortable. The GDC wants a full debrief and a plan for what comes next." "What do you think they'll do?" Emma asked. Hayes shrugged. "Hard to say. They've already started drafting new recruits. More civilians will be arriving soon. Whether they'll be ready in time." He trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. "We need more than numbers. We need strategy, something that gives us a real advantage." "Then find it," Hayes said bluntly, "because if you don't, none of us are walking away from this." Days turned into weeks as the survivors regrouped and prepared for the inevitable next wave of attacks. Training intensified, with Colonel Hayes pushing the recruits harder than ever. New arrivals joined the ranks, their wide eyes betraying a mix of fear and determination. Among them was Daniel Ross, a farmer whose calloused hands spoke of years spent working the land, and Lisa Grayson, a former teacher whose calm demeanor masked a fierce resolve. Sarah and Ryan took on leadership roles, helping the newcomers adjust to the harsh realities of their new lives. They shared stories of Haven 7 not to boast but to prepare the fresh recruits for what lay ahead. "It's not just about shooting straight," Sarah explained during one session. "You need to think on your feet, adapt, work together." Lisa raised her hand hesitantly. "What if we freeze up? What if we mess up?" "You will," Ryan admitted. "Everyone does at first, but you learn to push past it. Trust me, it's not courage that keeps you going. It's knowing you don't have a choice. Meanwhile, Emma worked tirelessly in the engineering bay, refining weapons based on Jack's findings. She developed targeting systems designed to exploit the weaknesses they had identified in the Veil's exoskeletons. Each prototype was tested rigorously, with volunteers providing feedback on accuracy and usability. Progress was slow, but incremental improvements gave hope that humanity might stand a chance. Jack, meanwhile, delved deeper into historical strategies, searching for anything that could be adapted to modern warfare. He became particularly interested in guerrilla tactics, focusing on hit-and-run maneuvers and ambushes. "The Veil relies on overwhelming force," he explained to Colonel Hayes during a briefing. "If we can strike quickly and disappear before they counterattack, we might be able to wear them down." Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "It's risky, but so is everything else we're doing. Let's see what you've got." A simulation was set up to test Jack's theories. Recruits split into small teams, tasked with infiltrating mock enemy positions and disabling targets before retreating. At first, the exercises were disastrous. Poor coordination led to confusion, and several teams were killed due to careless mistakes. But over time, the recruits improved. They learned to communicate silently, using hand signals and subtle cues to stay hidden. By the end of the training cycle, their success rate had climbed significantly. Despite these advances, morale remained low. The constant pressure and looming threat of another attack took its toll. Arguments broke out frequently, tempers flaring over minor issues. Even Sarah and Ryan weren't immune. After a particularly grueling day, they found themselves snapping at each other during dinner. "We can't keep doing this," Ryan exclaimed, slamming his tray onto the table. "Every time we win, the Veil comes back stronger. When does it end?" "When we stop letting them win," Sarah shot back, her voice rising. "If you want to give up, fine, but I'm not quitting." Ryan looked at her, his anger fading into frustration. "I'm not giving up, I don't know how much longer I can keep losing people." Sarah softened, reaching across the table to take his hand. "None of us do, but we have to try, for them." As the days passed, rumors began circulating about a major offensive planned by the Veil. Reconnaissance drones detected increased activity near Earth's outer defenses, suggesting an imminent assault. The GDC issued orders. Humanity's forces would launch a preemptive strike against the Veil's central hive structure, a massive biomechanical organism believed to coordinate their attacks. The mission was codenamed Operation Redemption. Its objective was clear: destroy the hive and cripple the Veil's ability to wage war. But achieving it would require unprecedented bravery and sacrifice. Volunteers were needed to plant explosives deep within the hive, ensuring maximum damage. Sarah stepped forward without hesitation. "I'll lead the team," she said firmly when Colonel Hayes asked for candidates. "I've been there before. I know what to expect." Ryan immediately volunteered to join her. "You're not going alone." Hayes studied them both, then nodded. "All right, but remember, this isn't just about courage, it's about coming back alive." Preparations for the mission consumed every waking moment. Weapons were checked and rechecked, gear was packed and repacked, and plans were rehearsed until they became second nature. On the eve of the operation, the entire camp gathered for a final briefing. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on everyone. "This is it," Colonel Hayes said, addressing the assembled recruits. "Tomorrow we strike back. Not because we're invincible, but because we refuse to surrender. Whatever happens, remember why you're here. Remember who you're fighting for." As the meeting ended, Sarah and Ryan stood together, looking out at the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red, the setting sun casting long shadows across the ground. Neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. They had trained for this moment, prepared for it in ways they never imagined possible. Now, all that remained was to see it through. Back in the command center, Jack and Emma finalized the last details of the mission. Maps of the hive's interior were spread across the table, marked with potential entry points and escape routes. Communication devices were double-checked to ensure they would function in the hive's hostile environment. "You're sure about this?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Jack admitted, "but it's the best chance we've got." Emma nodded, swallowing hard. "Then let's make it count." The following morning, the volunteers boarded shuttles bound for the hive. As the engines roared to life, Sarah glanced at Ryan, her expression resolute. "Ready?" she asked. Ryan forced a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be." The journey to the hive was eerily quiet. No one spoke, each person lost in their own thoughts. Outside the windows, the vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, dotted with stars that seemed impossibly distant. When the hive came into view, it loomed like a nightmare, a writhing mass of organic tissue and metallic spires, pulsing with an unnatural energy. "This is it," Sarah said as the shuttle docked. She grabbed her rifle and stepped onto the platform, her heart pounding in her chest. Behind her, Ryan followed, his jaw set in determination. Inside the hive, the air was thick and oppressive, filled with strange noises that echoed through the corridors. Biomechanical creatures patrolled the area, their glowing veins casting eerie shadows on the walls. The team moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows and avoiding detection. When they reached the core chamber, Sarah planted the explosives, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Let's go," she said, backing away from the device. The explosion that destroyed the Vale's central hive sent shockwaves rippling across the battlefield, both literal and metaphorical. For the first time since the alien threat emerged, humanity had struck a decisive blow. The biomechanical forces, scattered, their coordination disrupted by the loss of their command structure. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread quickly, bringing a fragile sense of hope to a world teetering on the brink of despair. At Fort Resolute, the mood was somber, despite the triumph. The cost of Operation Redemption weighed heavily on everyone. Ryan Carter's sacrifice haunted Sarah Blake, who found herself replaying his final moments over and over in her mind. She sat alone in the mess hall, staring at an untouched plate of food. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. Around her, others moved quietly, speaking in hushed tones or sitting in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Colonel William Hayes entered the room, his boots clicking softly against the floor. He stopped beside Sarah, placing a hand on her shoulder. "He knew what he was doing," Hayes said gently. "He saved all of you." Sarah nodded, though her throat felt too tight to speak. She wanted to believe that Ryan's death had meaning, but the weight of it pressed down on her, like a stone. Still, she forced herself to stand, to keep moving forward. That was what Ryan would have wanted, to honor his sacrifice by continuing to fight. Jack Harper and Emma Lewis worked tirelessly in the aftermath of the mission, analyzing data from the hive's destruction and studying how the Vale's forces responded. Their findings painted a mixed picture. While the loss of the central hive had crippled the Vale's ability to coordinate large-scale attacks, smaller groups of biomechanical creatures continued to harass Earth's defenses. These rogue units operated independently, making them harder to predict and eliminate. "It's not over," Jack said one evening as he and Emma reviewed holographic maps of recent skirmishes. "The Vale isn't just retreating, it's adapting." Emma frowned, leaning closer to examine the map. "Adapting how?" "They're testing us," Jack explained, "sending out smaller teams to probe our weaknesses. They're learning, just like we are." Emma sighed, rubbing her temples. "So what do we do now? Keep fighting until there's nothing left?" "For now, yes," Jack replied. "But we also need to think about the future, about how we can prevent this from happening again." Their conversation shifted to ideas for long-term solutions, ways to integrate human ingenuity with artificial intelligence without repeating the mistakes of the past. Emma proposed a hybrid approach, combining AI efficiency with carefully selected human oversight. Machines could handle routine tasks and calculations while humans provided creativity and adaptability in unpredictable situations. "We can't go back to relying solely on machines," Emma argued. "They're fast and precise, but they lack the flexibility to deal with something like the Vale. Humans bring something different to the table, something irreplaceable." Jack agreed. though he couldn't shake the memory of why humans were banned from war in the first place. "It's not just about winning battles," he said thoughtfully. "It's about remembering why we stopped fighting each other. Emotions make us strong, but they also make us dangerous. We have to find a balance." In the weeks that followed, the Global Defense Council convened to discuss the next steps. General Marcus Hale presented a proposal based on Emma's hybrid model, arguing that humanity's survival depended on collaboration between man and machine. The council debated fiercely, some members reluctant to reintroduce humans into combat roles after centuries of automation. But the evidence was undeniable. Machines alone couldn't stop the Veil. "Humans aren't perfect," Dr. Laura Bennett admitted during the meeting. "We make mistakes. We act on emotion instead of logic. But those same flaws give us the ability to innovate, to adapt, and to persevere when everything seems lost. Maybe that's what we need right now." After much deliberation, the council approved the proposal. A new initiative dubbed Project Unity was launched to develop advanced systems that combined AI technology with human input. Emma took charge of the engineering team, working closely with Jack to ensure the design prioritized both efficiency and ethical considerations. Meanwhile, Sarah became a symbol of resilience for the recruits. Her leadership during Operation Redemption earned her respect among the survivors, and she used her influence to inspire others. During training sessions, she emphasized teamwork and determination, reminding everyone of the sacrifices made to protect Earth. "We didn't win because we were stronger or smarter than the Veil," Sarah told a group of new arrivals. "We won because we refused to give up, because we worked together, trusted each other, and kept pushing forward no matter what." Her words resonated deeply, especially with Daniel Ross and Lisa Grayson, who had joined the ranks shortly before. The Hive mission. Both had struggled initially, overwhelmed by the demands of combat training. But under Sarah's guidance, they began to find their footing. Daniel's strength and endurance proved invaluable during physical drills, while Lisa's calm demeanor helped maintain morale during stressful exercises. As Project Unity progressed, humanity faced renewed challenges from the Veil. Smaller attacks persisted, forcing the defenders to remain vigilant. Each encounter provided valuable lessons, allowing Jack and Emma to refine their strategies and improve the hybrid systems. Slowly but surely, humanity began to turn the tide. One evening, Sarah stood outside the fort, gazing up at the stars. The sky was clear, the air crisp and cool. Beside her, Colonel Hayes approached, his expression thoughtful. "You've done good work here," he said, breaking the silence. "Your team looks up to you." Sarah smiled faintly. "I'm just trying to honor those who didn't come back." Hayes nodded. "You're doing more than that. You're showing them that we're still capable of greatness, even after everything we've been through." Inside the command center, Jack and Emma reflected on how far they had come. The journey had been grueling, marked by loss and uncertainty. Yet through it all, humanity had shown remarkable resilience. They hadn't just survived. They had adapted, evolved, and grown stronger. "This isn't the end," Emma said softly, watching as recruits practiced with the newly developed hybrid systems. "There will always be threats, challenges we can't foresee. But if we remember what got us here, if we hold on to the things that make us human, we'll be ready." Jack agreed, his gaze drifting toward the recruits. "Maybe that's the real lesson. Not that we're flawed, but that our flaws are what make us capable of change, of growth." As night fell over Fort Resolute, the camp settled into a rare moment of peace. Fires crackled in the distance, casting warm light on the faces of those gathered around them. Stories were shared, laughter echoed through the air, and for a brief moment the weight of the war lifted. Humanity's battle against the Veil was far from over, but the survivors had proven one thing beyond doubt. They could endure. They could rise above fear, grief, and despair to face whatever came next. And as long as they remembered the lessons of the past, the importance of unity, courage, and compassion, they would continue to fight for a better future. Under the vast expanse of stars, Sarah looked toward the horizon, her heart filled with quiet resolve. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but she knew one thing for certain. Humanity wasn't just surviving. It was finding its way back to what truly mattered, together.